bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 1 week since my last podcast. You're listening to the Sad Boys Book Club. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Father Dusty, and my child, truly you have sinned the greatest of all sins, for thou must have at least 8 podcasts a day. Thou saith the Lord, thou shalt it be done. Now go out and give me 7 Jake Pauls, and I may absolve you of your discretions.
Jake Pauls?
Yes.
You might need to walk me through that one, Father.
My son, if you must ask, thou shalt never know, and shall be denied in the kingdom of Prime.
Well,
I know that it is Brother Logan. I know that Brother Logan is the creator of Prime, but
it seems my name is no longer in the Book of Life.
yes. And I'm not sure how I feel about this opening anymore.
Well, I was originally gonna kind of spin it into like a bare naked ladies reference after the 1 week, but I figured, why get into that old stuff when we could be like, we could do some very contemporary Catholicism jokes. It's that kind of cutting edge humor that really makes the Sad Boys Book Club the #1 podcast for men, women, and non-binary people 18 to 35 in Iceland.
Welcome to the Sad Boys Book Club. My name is Dusty, and I totally did not just edit out a joke that probably should not ever see the light of day.
And I'm Daniel.
And this is the final part of The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, and I'm going to shock the world with what I'm about to say. Are you ready, Daniel?
I don't think I'll ever be ready, but I think you better just say it anyway.
I thoroughly enjoyed this part, and it bumped my rating from this book up from a 7 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10.
Wow. Okay. I like that.
I have 2 complaints, and both of them surround Jorge.
Well, that's fair. Well, I'm glad this book rounded out for you better than it was for you going in. I know the first part especially, you were kind of feeling iffy about it, which is understandable. I think I remember him specifically saying that the first 100 pages are something of a penance that the reader kind of pays to enter the world of the monastery. And maybe someone could have differing opinions on whether or not that is good. I think it kind of works within the context of the writing itself. It's sort of metatextual in a way, but I could see how someone would not enjoy that.
Yeah. It definitely did improve as it went on for me. I think I really struggled the most with the first part, struggled a little less with the second part, and struggled barely at all in this third part. So that's nice at least. So I appreciate that. I know I texted you the other day after I finished day 5. Really loved day 5. Day 5 is probably my favorite day of this entire book.
I think I agree. I think day 5 is the high point of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely feel a little stronger about it now that we're looking at the end than I did early on. And something I realized last week too when we were recording was I enjoy this book a lot more when I talk with you about it than I do when I'm reading it.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it goes back to the point that I've mentioned multiple times in the past on why I just love doing this in the first place is because just the ability to have this conversation with you about these books gives me a much better understanding of every book we read, even books that we've already read in the past like Jurassic Park, or books that don't necessarily require a huge amount of literary analysis, like something like The Expanse, where it's just a nice fun sci-fi action adventure series, I still feel like even with books that aren't supposed to exist for literary analysis, I still get a deeper enjoyment just having the discussion, which is why I just enjoy this as much as I do. And I think that it is paying dividends with this book in particular, because I feel like without us doing this, I'd have dropped this book before even finishing the first day and been like, nope, this isn't for me, I can't do it. But I finished it, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, and I think when I talk about these books with you, I also sort of I feel like I get a deeper understanding and appreciation for them as we go along, especially because I think you are a lot better at remembering the beat by beat plot details. So it helps, especially when we're kind of, since we do the whole recap section, it kind of re-solidifies in my mind, the things that happen, and it kind of, the concepts click together even better after we're done.
Yeah, which I actually find a little surprising in this book, because I thought for sure this was going to be a series where I'm just like, all right, Daniel, I'm going to need you to take the lead, and I'll just kind of throw some additional commentary in here and there. But this is going to basically be the Daniel show, occasionally guest starring Dusty, and it hasn't been that at all.
I think it's been pretty even-handed, all things considered.
Yeah, at least I hope so. I don't want me to drag down the whole thing, but I definitely feel like your analysis has been very good for my understanding of this book, because I think without that I'd have been lost a handful of times. So,
well, I appreciate that.
Anyways, I think if we're done complimenting each other, let's jump right in, huh? Unless you got any early final thoughts.
No, we can just, there's a decent chunk to cover, so we can just get it rolling and kind of give our thoughts as we go, and then circle back at the end.
All right. Given that we're covering like 3 days and then an additional like abbreviated couple decades for like the epilogue afterwards, I'm gonna try to go a little faster paced. I don't think we really need to get into the weeds of like some of the more kind of tangential parts of it, unless there's something that kind of adds on to the theme. So I'm gonna probably try to move a little quickly. I'm sure at any point if there's something you want to add, or you want to stop and be like, oh wait, we should talk about this, please stop me. So yeah, day 5. So we get a nice little bit of foreshadowing right at the start with Adso noticing that Bernard and Malachi talking, and there's an exchange of goods between the two of them, which that'll be important later. But yeah, this is the day that this is the first full day that the emissaries from both sides are here at the Abbey, and this is the day that the whole meeting, the whole reason why Adso and William are here, is gonna happen. The summit of sorts, as I called it last week, between the Pope's men and the Emperor's men. And Bernard, if you remember, is the head, for lack of a better term, inquisitorial monk of the Pope's men, and him and William exchanged blows, verbal blows, a little in day 4, and we're gonna see the culmination of all of that here in day 5. So yeah, the morning kind of goes about as normal as it can until we have our meeting. We have all of our people, all of our players for this summit gathered together, and it's kind of a mess. We have Abbo, the abbot, being the moderator, and it's supposed to be like a turn-taking thing, and I think it starts with one of the dudes from the Pope's side, and he's just kind of like, this is no different. This really is no different than like any recent presidential debate in America. If you've watched any of the presidential debates from the last, let's be real, basically all the ones that have Donald Trump in them, you basically know what you're getting into with this. It's very, very similar. So like I
thought it was funny when Bernard said wrong.
I can't remember any of the names of the other people that are for for the Pope, and I'm just going to go ahead and say they're not really important in the grand scheme of things. They only really exist to be part of this I'm going to be generous and call it a meeting. And like, okay, so I understand the point of this, and William even explains the point of this to Adso, just in case it didn't come across to the reader at all. I don't think we need to go deeply into the arguments themselves, because it's basically just a bunch of old dudes arguing about whether or not Jesus was poor.
And we've already kind of recapped who is on what side, essentially.
Yeah, and like, I get it, okay? Like, I understand that it's not about whether or not they truly believe Jesus was poor, and it's not truly about whether or not they believe in the whole poverty thing. It's all about power. This whole thing is about power, and the people that are on the Pope's side, they're afraid that if we go back into this belief of poverty, that it's going to basically impede their ability to have more wealth and power than the peasant class, basically. So it's selfishness. It's not Christ-like behavior. It's just greedy men, like I said last time, that are using their religion as a shield to hide their very ugly and unchristian-like greed, basically. So, like, that's not really
well. Also, to
surprising.
sort of support their ideology, and their support their power prerogatives over the political situation in Europe and in Christendom broadly.
Yeah. So, like, I get it. I understand the point, and I understand, what the deeper meaning is behind it. But on the surface, just reading the argument as it is, it's just a bunch of dudes shouting at each other and quite literally getting into a fist fight over whether or not they think Jesus was poor. Like, they're arguing about whether or not he owned the clothes on his back at one point. And I'm like, okay, guys, this has kind of gotten a little out of hand. Like, I feel like I feel like this is a kids arguing in the sandbox kind of thing at this point. Like, this is just silly. And yeah, like I said, they get into a literal fist fight over it, and it's kind of crazy. But the important takeaway here, because these meetings don't honestly matter in the grand scheme of the story, outside of just that no agreement has come to. But after,
which was shocking to me. I got zagged here. I thought that this was going to be a lot more important than it ended up being.
Yeah, because this was what the whole, like, the background plot was building towards. But yeah, it really did just kind of was like, they argued and nothing came of it. But I think the reason why nothing came of it is because of what Bernard does here in a bit, which was just, like, masterful storytelling.
Yeah. Should we before we get to that, should we kind of recap William's the things that he says really quickly?
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I don't want to jump too far ahead, because we also got to talk about what happens with Severinus. I said his name correct without you needing to correct me. The whole bit with that in between the two sections of the meeting. Sure. So after the fist fight is broken up, they take a bit of a break, and Severinus comes to talk to William, and he's like, "Hey, I have a strange thing that I need to show you in the infirmary. Wink, wink." And it's like, he's trying to do it secretively and quietly, but it's impossible, and he's overheard by a lot of people, like Jorge and the cellarer, what's his name, Remigio? And
Aymaro.
Yeah. And so William's like, yeah, sure, let's go take care of that. But then I don't remember if it was Michael or someone else. He's just like, hey, dude, like, we gotta get back in there. Your speech is coming up. And he's like, shoot, you're right, so I can't go. And he tells, but he notices that Jorge is leaving, and he asks Adso to follow Jorge, because he doesn't really trust what he's going to do with that information. I forgot who's leading him away. It might have been Malachi. I don't remember. But he notices that the cellarer is following Severinus. So Adso takes the initiative to follow the cellarer as well, just to ensure that Severinus stays safe. And he ends up basically delaying the Cellarer enough so that Severinus can get into the infirmary and lock himself in. So Adso gives himself a pat on the back, gives himself a high five, goes back and tells William, and William's like, you know what, yeah, that was actually the right call. But then we have William's time to speak here in this meeting, which, Daniel, if you want to talk about this, because, yeah, interesting section here.
So this, I think, is probably the more... I mean, I found the question of Christ's poverty to be kind of interesting, but I could imagine if that not necessarily being everybody's cup of tea. But I think this part is really kind of a very important moment for William's character, and is essentially kind of it's the evocative moment of, like, what does William believe? What does he think? But it's also kind of like it just works further to advance that idea that we were seeding before, that he kind of represents the Enlightenment. So here he kind of using scripture often kind of elucidates his position that the church needs to withdraw from the sphere of politics and then to kind of make way for an elected assembly of the people type government. So something akin to a representative democracy, something like that, I think, is what he's articulating here. And it kind of works as like this proto-enlightenment thing. And this would actually be like extraordinarily radical to the ears of the monks listening. And it's kind of something that's interesting, because even the people that are ostensibly on William's side are kind of like taken aback by this. They're not necessarily thrilled, but they cannot refute his arguments because he couches them in a very approachable way, a very gentle way, and a very scripturally based way. One of the things that he argues about is like poverty, what the meaning of poor, and essentially what William argues is we can disagree on what the exact nature of the poverty was. I think it's more important to view it in the context of of power, and in so doing, he kind of removes the smokescreen that we have heretofore, this sort of metaphorical game of defining, was Christ poor? What is poor in this? He really kind of brings to bear that this is truly about power, and he argues correctly that Christ was. He argued not for the apostles to seek a sort of worldly or coercive power, as it were, but to essentially work in the religious sphere of society. And you might remember where Jesus refers to he uses a coin to make this point, where he says, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's." And then that's essentially the point that he's making here. And he kind of is enumerating this sort of political separation of church and state, which is also pretty radical, because at this time there was a lot of the church, the various kings were essentially the heads of the church in their domains, where they were able to name the upper levels of clergy, say the bishops and whatnot. They had appointment power over that, so that would have been quite shocking, actually. And so he kind of goes from there about the bit about the church not wanting worldly or should not be involved with worldly or coercive power. That they get out of the sphere of all sort of governance, and then therefore the Pope, who has been under this framework removed from the structures of government, he should be removed from the political process of crowning the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which this is kind of where he loses some of the other the people that are putatively on his side, because they still while they are on the same side, it's mainly a convenience, where I think they still want a church that has exercises a political authority of sorts. But I don't know. This part was kind of interesting to me. It kind of showed a underlying contradiction of ideology within the Franciscan Minorite axis that are represented by Ubertino and Michael of Cesena and those guys. But I think that is kind of one of the big points of this book, wherein we are often seeing people's ideologies and how they sort of come to grips with opposing ideas, this sort of dissonance in them, and what it can lead to in the case of someone like, say, Ubertino, how the dissonances within his ideology and within his very soul have turned him into this very bizarre figure, to put it lightly.
The proto-incel, if you will.
Yes, to become the proto-incel. This, of course, does not please Bernard, as one might expect. And he's like, interesting argument, William. Perhaps you should come to Avignon and make your argument to His Holiness yourself. And just essentially trying to bait him, not so subtly. I think very, like, almost, it's not, maybe not even bait. It's like a pretty much a threat. It's like, you tell that to the Pope IRL, fight me IRL, essentially. And but William is like, oh no, I am an old man and I have heart fluctuations and I can't do it. And then Bernard, is like, yes, quite, But I think that's really the key points of William there, and I think that's when William and Atso go check on Severinus, right?
Yeah, which one thing I found really funny was when I was reading that section, and he's just sitting there basically saying, we should have the church get out of politics, and we should have a democracy where the government is run by the people for the people. My first thought was, and I know you never watched this, and probably for the best now, but in the series finale of Game of Thrones, when everyone's spoilers, by the way, for a show that ended 5 years ago and ended in like the worst possible way, they're like all gathered to figure out what to do now that there's like no king or queen left, and it's like all of the last remaining important characters just gathered in a circle, and Sam is just like, what if we had a democracy where our leader was elected by the people? And everybody just laughs at him, and he just sits back down in shame. It just reminded me of that, which, by the way, that scene was like the William scene, like, I chuckled at it because of the Game of Thrones reminder that it gave me, but, like, William's scene was very cool, and very awesome, and very well written, and very in character with him, whereas that scene was very much just, it was stupid, and it was a tongue-in-cheek, just kind of like the writers being like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if there was a democracy in this world? That wouldn't work. So, it just reminded me of that. I got a good little chuckle out of it.
Yeah, that sort of cynical anti-politics is really something that I don't have a lot of time for anymore, really.
Yeah.
I think that's I don't know. I just wasn't very... I remember hearing about that. I was not particularly amused.
Yeah, it was really stupid. It was already a dumb scene, and they just had to add that stupid, like, what if democracy? Haha, idiot kind of scene to it, and it's like, alright, whatever, guys. But yeah, it just reminded me of that, and I thought it was funny. But yeah, really, really good scene from William. Just this book is just constantly trying to remind us just how much of an awesome dude that William is. But yeah, so the meeting is basically concluded. I think it's concluded because of there's like a ruckus that's happening, and yeah, because I think they're basically forced to stop because like something happened, and William's like, I fear something has happened to Severinus. and they go and they find a huge crowd outside the infirmary, and Severinus has been murdered. So they're trying to get some sort of privacy so they can figure out what's going on. And at this point, Benno comes up to them. Benno, if you don't remember, is the dude that they met with. That told them, basically confirmed to them that Berengar had ostensibly blackmailed, and if we're being real here, I guess content warning, 3, 2, 1, go, raped Adelmo before he killed himself. That guy, the guy that told us all of that, he implies that Malachi was already inside the infirmary, which, casts a bit of a spotlight on him as a suspect as a principal suspect for this. But William is able, I think he convinces Abbo to have everyone evacuate, and he has Benno stand guard and help keep the people away while him and Adzo try and find the book, because it has to be the book from the what was it called, the
Finis Africa?
Yeah, the Finis Africae. This book that is supposedly killing all of these men. They also check and see that his fingers and his tongue are blackened. So once again, the poison is afoot. And so they're searching through it, and Adzo finds this book that's in Arabic, and William's like, "You idiot! That's Arabic. Put it down, stupid." And they can't find anything.
Which Benno laughs at.
Yes, he does, which is important, and there's a reason why I'm bringing up this particular book. I wonder why. And so they eventually they can't keep anyone back anymore. He asks Benno to go tail Malachi, and then they leave and just kind of figure out what to do next. And as they're leaving, William kind of realizes what happened, and he's like, "Oh my God, wait a minute. The book's going to be in Arabic, and it's going to also be in Greek. Oh my God, we're stupid. That was the book. We got to hurry back." And they hurry back, and they can't find the book at all. And he's just like, "Oh no." And Adzo thinks to himself, Benno wasn't laughing at me because of William's chastising. He's laughing because he realized that we found the book and William didn't even, just disregarded it. So Benno has more than likely gotten the book. But instead of confronting him immediately, they decide to go to... where? Oh God, they don't go to the abbot, right? They don't go to the abbot. They go to. They go to the kitchen, right?
I think so. Yeah, I'm trying to remember that one specific part.
It's not really super important.
Is that when they kind of formulate the hypothesis for the murders?
I think so. It's not necessarily super important where they go, I don't think, because we have the trial coming up almost immediately afterward. It's basically just like it's just really this little bit to where narrator Adso just kind of fourth walls us a little bit, where he's like, William decided not to confront Benno on this completely, but if he did, he would have found the book because Benno immediately took it to his room. But yeah, they got William kind of got in his own way, which is something that actually does happen a lot in this book. A lot of the issues that William faces are because he gets in his own way. But hey, that means that the character has a little more depth. His pride is a flaw that sometimes causes him to struggle in ways that he wouldn't have otherwise. It's pretty good character writing, if I say so myself.
He makes these brilliant deductions and has these great ideas, but he's not like a flawless or perfect character. He's not the what is it people say, the Mary Sue.
A Gary Stew in his case.
Oh yes. Fine.
So now we no, I'm sorry. It might be important to mention why there's a trial. That's right, that might be important. So when they arrive at the infirmary and find Severinus dead, Bernard is basically, he's there and he's like, "Oh yeah, the cellarer, Remigio. He was here. We found him here. He was frantically searching for something. So clearly he's the murderer. So we're going to arrest him." And it's convenient too because we basically have had a warrant out for him all morning. So we've been searching for him, and here he is. And wow, look at that. He killed Severinus. What are the odds of that? And needless to say, we're all pressing X to doubt right now, but doesn't really matter.
This again is part of a larger political power play that we will see as we get to the conclusion here.
Yeah, and this is why, all things considered, the whole meeting, the whole summit thing, just really didn't matter. So now we have the trial of the cellarer, and it's oh man, it's just another sign of why Bernard is the main. I'm gonna say he's the main villain of this book, even though he's only really in like a day and a half of it. Um, and he is not the murderer that's killing these people. Believe it or not, the guy that got here midway through day 4 is not the one that's killing these people. But I really do feel like Bernard is the most evil person in this book. And yeah, he does this whole thing. It's this big, like, political maneuvering that he does to where he's able to present the trial in such a way that he's accusing Remigio of heresy in a way that will delegitimize the arguments of all of the Franciscans by linking
L plus ratio plus you fell off plus you're sheltering heretics.
basically, and he's using his history with Fra Dolcino as like the grounds for it, and he's also accusing him of the murders, which Bernard does not believe that Remigio is the murderer, but he doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care that these monks are being killed. It's like it's not my problem. The truth
does not exist to him. In a real sense, particularly not in a Christian sense. It only exists to serve as a sort of rhetorical cudgel.
Yeah. And so what we learned throughout this trial is that they got Salvatore to rat on him, because if you remember, Salvatore was arrested the night prior because of the whole incident with having the woman spit on the eggs with the cat's eyes in them. And so he confessed everything that that Remigio was having him do with the women, and their history with Dolcino, and the letters or the papers that were exchanging hands at the beginning that I mentioned, that was totally important foreshadowing that Malachi was giving Bernard, were these letters that Remigio had entrusted to Malachi, letters that were written by Dolcino and given to Remigio to send to his allies in order to keep the spirit of the rebellion alive, even though he felt his end was near. And so throughout this whole trial, at first, obviously Remigio's denying everything, but once his lies are kind of just, exposed, he defaults back to his rebellious state, and he's just kind of like, yeah, we did it, and I'm glad we did it. And he's like, okay, if you want me to confess to the murders? Sure. Like, because I know that the truth doesn't matter to you. And he just does this whole, like, yeah, I killed him by doing, I killed Adelmo because I was jealous of his youth, so I pushed him off the cliff. I killed Berengar because I forgot why. And he just makes up these ridiculous reasons, and he's just like, if you're gonna force a confession out of me, then like whatever, I'll play along, and because I'm dead anyways, and I'll just embellish the hell out of this.
That's not quite correct. The reason he confesses to those murders is because at that point he's looking at being tortured, because at this point Bernard is really, really laying it on thick. He's like, we will leave you locked in a room for a week, and on the 8th day they'll come in and show you the instruments of torture, and on the 9th day we will torture you, and then blah blah. He was just like, he's really like laying it on thick. And Remigio, during his whole, and this, we can't cover it all here, but the whole speech is actually kind of touching in a certain way, because it's a man sort of reckoning with the sort of his sort of self-admitted cowardice with which he has lived his life, and so when he is faced with this torture, he's like, look, you got what you want. I admitted to the heresy. He kind of had this moment where he kind of he was finally able to boldly say to the church all of the things that he wanted to say all those years ago. Not all of them were maybe good. I mean, I don't think it's good that they started to attack just random people in an attempt to immanentize the eschaton or whatever. But it's but at the same time, it was kind of it was interesting to see, like, he'd gone from like this very cowardly way of life to like finally sort of self-actualizing in a very bizarre way. But anyway, after he was faced with the torture, he was like, I really don't want to, if because he knew that if he was going to be tortured, he would take all of that back, and he would kind of be forced back into the sort of this cowardly way of life once again, because he knew he would not be able to hold up under torture. And so, in an attempt to just allow himself to die with dignity, he's confessing to the murders in the hopes that Bernard will pronounce a death sentence for him, in punishment for his quote-unquote crimes.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, the trial does exactly what Bernard needs it to do, and it basically destroys any chance that the other characters have for any meaningful change or anything to kind of go in their favor. And they realize as such, and so afterwards they're talking, and Michael is like, I have to go to Rome. I have to speak to the Pope anyways. Like, I just don't really have a choice in the matter, so I'm going to go and do that. And William's talking to Ubertino, and he's like, hey, you realize that that Bernard's probably going to have you killed if you stay here, so you should probably get out, like, right now. So Ubertino escapes. And that just kind of is the end of that. That this whole plot line is basically done now. Bernard's going to be leaving in the morning with his prisoners, the cellarer, Salvatore, and the poor woman who is going to be killed. So all of that's just kind of wrapped up, and all we really have left at this point is the murder mystery. So, like, all right, that's that, I guess.
Yeah, it felt very anticlimactic, but nevertheless, it was satisfying in a way, because it's like, yeah, well, that would do it, you know?
Yeah, it's just kind of one of those things to where it's like sometimes life just does not give you a satisfying conclusion, and you just kind of have to move on.
It's an unsatisfying conclusion written in a very satisfying way.
Yeah. And so the last thing that happens in day 5 is instead of the abbot having some sort of yagoogly about Severinus, he instead has Jorge do it. And I think, if I remember correctly, he throws a little shade too, because he's just like, we'll have our oldest member do it, and he has Jorge do it, who's like the second or third oldest, just completely slighting what's his name, Alvarado?
No, it's why can't I remember his name either? Oh yes, Alenardo. There we go.
And then Jorge comes up, and this is one of the 2 issues that I mentioned at the beginning of that I have with this section, is this giant Jorge speech that goes on for so long, and he's just basically the point of it that I could glean from it. If you gleaned more that I missed, but by all means, extrapolate for me. But basically, just him being like, all you modern progressives are stupid, and this is not how things should be. We already know everything we need to know. We need to stop learning. We need to stop progress, because all that's going to do is nothing for us, and it's just going to take us away from the path of the divine. So, like, basically just stop and accept with what we have, and stop being smart, stay stupid. Yes, I'm angry. The Antichrist is here. Stop laughing.
I mean, that's pretty much. It's he I think he essentially, he's reproaching them for their sort of their pride, and his point is that there can be no further truths discovered. All of the truth has already been, all the truth that the human mind can grasp has been given at this point, and all they can do now is sort of like, I guess, hold on to it, summarize it, and kind of protect it, but not to do more research, not to, that's kind of what you're saying, but I just wanted to kind of emphasize those aspects of what he's saying.
Yeah. Yeah, this was definitely one that I kind of, if I'm being completely honest here, I kind of started skimming after a while because I was just like, man, this is pages upon pages of this dude just like
It was a
really laying
harangue.
in. Yeah, he just really laid it on thick, and he kept talking in circles, and I'm just like, man, I don't care. I just honestly don't care. I don't like Jorge. He's one of my least favorite characters. I at least like respect the villainy of Bernard. I just hate Jorge. I just think he sucks. There I will speak to a really great part of Jorge's writing at the end. But like I just get really exhausted reading about this dude who basically just says like laughter is stupid and is sinful and is of the devil and you all suck and you all should stop being smart. I just don't care and you just lose me. But that's day 5. My favorite day in this entire book. I thought it was great. The trial was fantastic. The meeting was funny and entertaining. Pour one out for my boy Severinus. I said his name wrong. Dang it! I can't do one episode without saying his name wrong. Severinus, who was my second favorite monk boy behind Nicholas. So pour one out for him. He was also quite cool. Um, and yeah, day 6. Um, if I remember correctly, day 6. Yeah, this is the one that starts where I think it's like Malachi isn't around and they can't find him.
Yeah, they're at morning
Actually,
prayers.
I'm sorry. Back up real quick. Sorry, I forgot. At dinner, we got to mention that they confront Benno, and he tells them that yeah, he did take the book and he hid it in his room, but he gave it to Malachi when Malachi offered him to take Berengar's place as the assistant librarian. And it's basically just like, look, guys, like I know that I was sitting there saying that like all of these people suck and like these are all bad people and whatnot and we should not deal with them, but like he offered me power and who am I to say no to that? So like yeah, I'm a hypocrite, I'll admit it. So
Many
Benno,
many such cases.
yeah.
He was real. He was the guy that said he's gonna go reform it from the inside.
Oh yeah, totally. uh I see an absolute fire in the heart of Benno.
Yeah, he's gonna fix all the problems with the library. I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure that his passion will engulf him, and he will blaze brighter than most in that library.
I will say, for better or for worse, things will never be the same.
Oh man, Benno dies in a fire. Uh, anyways, spoilers. Sorry. So yeah, Malachi is missing, and he eventually, and it's this is making Jorge super nervous. And eventually he shows up, but he's very like lethargic it seems. And when somebody goes to check on him, they realize that something's wrong, and he falls on them. And William comes to investigate, and his fingers and tongue are black, and he's like seeing without seeing, and he says he tells William right before he dies it's something along the lines of like it's just like he said, it's like 1,000 scorpions, and before William can get any more from him, he dies. So, bye Malachi, I guess. So there's another one down. Jorge is upset because, well, I know why, but we don't know why yet. Um, and yeah, so Nicholas becomes the new cellarer. The abbot sets him up for that.
I just want to throw out there that also, as Malachi is dying, he said something about it had the power of 1,000 scorpions.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what he said. I knew it had something to do with scorpions. I couldn't remember exactly what. So yeah, the Nicholas is the new cellarer, and he's doing all of that, which is not really super important to all things considered, but just worth noting that Nicholas is kind of getting a. I don't know if you call it a promotion at this point. Honestly, I'm not really sure. But we do learn from this that Benno is not being trusted, so he's basically just like he kind of got shafted a little with Malachi's death. Like the abbot's like, no, you're not going to be the librarian. You just basically know your place, idiot. Um, yeah, we're starting to see more. Cause we've been seeing throughout this book how there seems to be factions inside of the Abbey. There's the Italians versus the foreigners is basically what it is, and Alenardo is one of the basically the oldest and kind of the most respected of the Italians. And we had the story from before of how he got snubbed by a foreigner to become the librarian in the past. So like something I find really interesting is at this point in time, it's starting. Like Echo is kind of trying to paint the Italians as possibly the people behind all of this, because it's looking like all the foreigners are the ones that are dying, and so it's like, oh, maybe this is going on with like the Italians who are like getting this big deep-seated plan to kind of take back the Abbey, because even Abo isn't Italian. He's a foreigner, and there's a lot of mistrust between him and the Italian monks. So I think he does a really great job of just planting that little seed of maybe it's one of the Italians that's doing all of this, because they seem to be like taking all of these deaths quite positively. They like this is really just kind of an absolute win for them, because they're like, oh yeah, more of these foreigners are just getting fucked. Like, neat.
He's a self-hating Italian.
Yeah.
He's like Carmela in The Sopranos.
So something that William realizes is that everyone that's had the blackened fingers and tongue, they knew Greek, and so he thinks that might have something to do with their fate, ostensibly. And he confronts Benno because he wants to go back through Venantius's desk. He confronts Benno, and Benno's like super scared, and he's like, oh, I'm next, I'm gonna die next, oh, they're gonna come at me. And after talking with him and realizing that he's really kind of an idiot that just kind of bullshitted his way to his position, they figure out enough to know that he's basically safe, and he's like, dude, you're good, don't worry about it. But he needs to go talk to the abbot because things have kind of gotten out of hand, and so now William thinks that the abbot might be the next target. So yeah, they'll have to confront him about that soon. But before that, it's before that, right? When they go to the crypt.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, like before they can go talk to the abbot, they go down to the crypt with Nicholas. And I mean, like, I don't know, man. This section was weird because like they go down to the crypt, and this is where all the treasures are that Abo has been collecting, and it's like his pride and joy, and it's his trophy room, so to say. And this is so weird to me, okay? So, like, he's listing off all of the treasures, and at first it's things like, you know, it's gems and jewels, encrusted goblets, and really just nice, exquisite things that are, like, that show a sign of wealth. But then you have more, like, religious relics and artifacts, and it's like some of the stuff is just really weird, like the rib of this person, the finger bone of this person, the chin of this person, the upper shoulder blade of this person, and I'm like, really? Really?
That was a real thing.
That's a weird thing.
People would claim to have, like, relics that were oftentimes, like, bones of saints.
Yeah, but like the chin and shoulder blade, it's like, oh my god. Like, some things I understand. Like, someone's like, oh yes, this is a shard of the cross that Jesus was crucified on. Like, that's kind of one thing, I guess. But then there was also, like, a scrap of the tablecloth from the Last Supper. A scrap of the robe of John the Baptist. And it's like, can you honestly trust you can't trust any of this. And I think William also makes a comment about that, and he
makes a joke. It's
I love this joke. Yeah, it's what you're getting to. Is the joke. I love this joke he made where he makes a comment about how this stuff is probably fake, and Adso's like, he's shocked by that, and William's like, yeah, you know, when I was young, I saw the skull of a 12-year-old John the Baptist, and then Adso's like, he was much older when he died, though. And William's like, oh yeah, that skull must have been in a different church.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. Didn't he also say that if they put together all of the splinters of the cross, that it would be bigger than the actual cross or something like that.
Yeah, he said you to think that Jesus was crucified in a forest.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So, William with the phenomenal sense of humor, and yeah, it's I can't help but feel like most of these things are fake. It's just it's almost like a placebo thing. And also something else I want to point out: all of these treasures, all of these relics. Well, maybe not so much the relics, but the treasure, the actual like material treasure, is like so strange to me to be in this like holy Catholic abbey under the church in like the basement catacombs of the church. Like, how material? Like you this is a religious place, and you have like gold and gem encrusted things. Like, doesn't
Well,
that?
the abbot kind of explains some of that stuff later.
Yeah, but like all the same though, it's just
Well, I'm not. I agree with you. I'm just saying their reasoning will become apparent here in a little bit.
yeah, and it's like, dude, like that is so anti-Jesus of you.
You're sounding like a Franciscan or a Minorite over there.
Yeah, you know, I feel like Bernard would see that and just be like, maybe I was wrong about this abbey. Like this abbot guy, he knows what's up. But it just strikes me as remarkably tone deaf.
I think he is. I think the abbot was no, not I think he was a Dominican, so he wasn't really part of the poverty movement.
Yeah. But I find it just remarkably just another case of hypocrisy in the so-called leader of this faith. So now we have after that, because William's like, I gotta go, I'll be back. He wants to go and look at the writings again. We have this really weird dream sequence that Adso has as he falls asleep. Do you want to take this one?
Okay. This one I'm not sure is super crucial, but we can give it a quick rundown. So as they are singing the Dies Irae, which is a traditional chant, that is around like funereal services and that kind of thing.
Do you want to give me your best Dies Irae? Dies Irae?
Dies Irae, Dies Irae. So it's something like that, and then it like gets longer. I don't know. It's been a long time since I was exposed to all of that stuff. But let's see. So Adso, because he's not really slept well over this whole time, he kind of nods off. And so as they're kind of going through this kind of as they're going through these rituals, he kind of falls asleep, and he has what he describes as a vision or a dream, possibly a vision. And in the dream, he sees the various people from the abbey, including Jorge and Bernard and the abbot and several of the other monks he's seen, including several of the ones who have died. And he sees them also with several figures of the Bible from both the Old and New Testament. And they're at this bacchanalian feast, I guess is the best way to put it. And so they act even in such a way that is out of character with a lot of them. And I think there's a lot of interesting things that are, if I was a little bit more fresh on some of those stories, I could even go into a little bit further what was kind of going on there. It was kind of interesting. I don't know. It was just kind of like to use another Sopranos reference. I guess it was a mixture of the sacred and the profane, if you will. The feast kind of, as it goes on, it kind of becomes more and more debauched, and eventually he sees the girl from the village, and all of the people, the various religious figures, and people from the Bible begin to attack the girl from the village, accusing her of, of various crimes and various sins, and they eventually they capture her, and they torture her, and they basically mutilate her. I think there's no real way to say it other than that.
I definitely had a bit of a double take at the line on how they farted on her face.
They started doing, after she was already dead, after they killed her, they started doing stuff like that. That was truly bizarre. It is a very bizarre section.
Which that's like exactly how it's written. It's like, and then farted on her, or like then they proceeded to fart on her face, then urinate on her head, and I'm just like, all right, this is already weird, but this is I didn't expect to read the word fart in this book, that's for sure. And I read, and you'll read it about 2 or 3 more times before the end.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, and
I don't know if this is accurate or not, but it feels anachronistic to suddenly see the word fart in this book.
Well, I'm sure that kind of thing, I mean, that kind of humor, for lack of a better word, has kind of existed for probably since the beginning, but it seems a little strange, especially within the context of the sort of religious thing. But it does kind of, like I said, it's a mixture of the sacred and the profane, and it's a little bit of a... It kind of shows the chaotic, inverted nature almost of the vision. And so Ubertino, he's like telling, he's once again cornering Adso and talking about how this is what happens to sinners and whatnot. And then and then I think Salvatore at that point comes by, and he is like, he's different. He walks in the midst of a flame, but he is not like afraid. He does not seem like himself. He seems like himself, but at peace. And he says something about what does he say? Now I knew all about the mortal human body, its sufferings and its corruption. And that kind of works as like a trigger phrase, and the feast kind of resets, and people are like back to where they were before, and they're acting normally. And Adso, he sees the girl, and she's like not dead and defiled anymore. She's herself, and she mentions that they will meet again in heaven and all that. And so I think, let's see, at that point there was a little bit more. I think that's when like his depiction of the pseudo apostles, they come back, and they are the ones to crown the emperor. And after that, Pope John, who is the Pope in Avignon, appears, and he's very confused, and he's just talking nonsense, and everybody's kind of ignoring him. And then they go on to hunt truffles, and so it's just kind of it's very interesting. I think it is kind of symbolic of how Adso is right now. He's going through a period in his life where he's having perhaps not a crisis of faith, but a crisis of understanding of like what is the faith that he is adhered to and has pledged his life to in this case, because he is agreed to become a monk. And so he has this dream of this bizarre world where power hierarchies are like maybe not inverted totally, but they do not represent, they're in a chaotic and disordered way from the way he would view them. And I don't know, there's probably a lot of different interpretations you could draw from it, but it just that's kind of more where I ended up is it's kind of representative of Adso's growing turmoil and confusion, I guess, regarding what does his faith actually mean.
Yeah. So after he wakes up, he tells William about this, and William's like, "Oh yeah, it's yeah, that you've realized that you've read this before. This is some famous comedy book that you
It
probably
was like
read."
the original Aristocrats joke.
Yeah, I can't remember what the book was called. It was like something Copus or something like that. Uh, the Coena Cipriani.
Oh, okay. What does that mean?
The Feast of Cyprian, or the Cyprians.
Huh.
I'm assuming the people from Cyprus. So maybe the Coena Cipriani. But yeah, that kind of gives William the realization that he had seen that book, written in the for lack of a better term, the glossary of the library on Venantius's desk. He goes back, and we have this whole bit where he kind of just has a bit of an epiphany about the librarians, because like I think it was one of the conversations they had earlier. They were talking about who was it they talked to about the library. I think it was they talked to Nicholas. No, was it Nicholas about the librarians? Who the past librarians? Yeah, it was. They were talking to Nicholas earlier, and he was telling him about how like the past librarians and the past abbots and the kind of history of that, and how there was disagreements about who became the next librarian and abbot, and it was a little bit of like political machinations, and like the time periods weren't really set up. But basically, he used that information to discover that using the librarians and kind of deducing when they would have been the librarians. He's like flipping through the pages of all of the books that are in the library, because if you were, I don't remember if we actually mentioned this in the first part, but the library, the index of the library books are ordered by the order in which they are received. So the current head librarian is the one that writes the book into the catalog. And so going off of the handwriting, he can determine who each librarian is, and with his own personal knowledge of how of when these books were written, and knowing that they can't have gone into the library before they were written, he can also kind of estimate around what year each of the handwriting, when the handwriting changes and the next person comes in. And there's like a 10-year gap where his what they were told doesn't line up. So there's like some hidden librarian that they're not aware of, and I think one or both of them, him and Adzo, think that librarian might be the one that Alenardo was speaking about, that basically he got shafted on for becoming the librarian, and that person might be who they're looking for. Yeah, I think that's a bit about that, and I think it's at this point where they're talking to Benno, and he tells them about, like, he asks him about that book, the Coena, and he's like, hey, did anyone talk about it? And Venantius did, and it really pissed off Jorge, and how that book was forbidden. And I think this is when Benno was actually like, hey, I'm afraid I'm gonna die next, and he's just like, and William's like, oh yeah, no, dude, you're good, don't worry about it. But then this is when they go to the abbot to speak to Abbo, and kind of tell him everything that they know, and Abbo's just kind of like, when you got here, I figured you would be some amazing, super cool detective guy that would fix all of my problems, but you kind of suck. And William's like, yeah, I'm going to level with you. I'm a little disappointed in myself as well. And Abbo's like, yeah, well, leave. He's like, I'll take care of this. This is my problem now. You suck. You're not going to do anything. You've already caused enough damage. Be gone by morning. And he like also tries to flex on Adso a bit, and he's like, look at this ring. This ring's nice. This means I'm awesome. Kiss my ring and forget everything. And William's like, no, stop trying to do that to my apprentice. That's like not cool. And
what's very weird, it was giving very bizarre and off-putting vibes, but it felt like Adso was kind of going with it.
He was. He was like about to lean in and kiss, or he did kiss the ring before, but he was like, "Yeah, I was totally going to do that and forget everything, and you wouldn't be reading this right now if William didn't interject." And it's like, why?
It's like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Why is this dude just sitting there bragging about his power and his wealth? This is, I think, what you were talking about when you were saying his reasoning for having all of his treasures. This is when like this whole bit comes in. Like, dude cares more about his reputation and the reputation of the abbey than the monks that were murdered. And he's basically just like, the most important thing is to make sure that this does not get out. So I don't care how many people die, as long as nobody knows and my reputation is fine. That's all that matters.
And it kind of it does kind of call to mind one of the things that William says during this whole thing is that he's basically had enough of Abbo and the Benedictine order writ large, and he says that they are worse than princes, more baronial than barons, and that he's basically he's like, oh my god, you guys suck so much, and he's mad about a number of things, but he's also mad about how they kind of, because of their actions, the girl was killed essentially,
Yeah.
or is going to be killed, and but they're protecting their own. He's to continue to pull from my film and TV references. It's very sort of Serpico confronting the thin blue line kind of thing we got going on right now.
Yeah. I love how Adso is technically one of these people, and he's just like, man, you and all your people suck, and Adso's just like, hey, and he's like, well, I'm right,
He is.
He is, but I just thought it was just really funny. He's just like, fuck you in particular, Adso.
I mean, I gotta say, kind of deserved. Who gets hypnotized by a creepy old man with a ring?
Yeah.
Come on, kid.
But to be fair, William does not solve this mystery without Adso.
That's fair.
Yeah, so they realized that either the abbot knew everything all along and didn't feel like he had use of them anymore, or didn't know anything and William just told him everything and now he's just like, ho ho. Then Adso's like, well, maybe he actually didn't know, but he wants to solve this now so that he can stop the different factions inside the abbey from like basically turning against him. And he's like, oh, that's possible. But all William knows is that they need to actually finally enter the Finis Africae, because that's where the book is now. And yeah, there's like a whole commotion. They see Jorge head inside one of the houses with Nicholas. And yeah, Benno tells them that everything's kind of gone crazy. Everyone's just stopped working. Everything's kind of ground to a halt. Everyone's gossiping. Yeah, just things are not okay in the Abbey. And that night, at their nightly prayer and whatnot, Jorge is gone. Benno is not there. And I think Nicholas is also not there. But like Benno and Nicholas, they at least have a reason for not being there because of the jobs that were assigned from them by Abbo. But Jorge's not there. Alenardo, apparently, according to Abbo, is sick, and Abbo is the one that's telling everyone all of this, and so William is just like, that's a little suspicious. I feel like Abbo might have done something. We don't know if these people are still alive or not. And yeah, it doesn't help at all when Abbo is just like, oh yes, let us pray for Jorge and his health, his good health, that it remains. And it's just really the Abbo is being real suspicious right now, and William is just like, yeah, we need to get into the library tonight because we are leaving tomorrow. We're gonna do it, but I am determined. We are going to solve this before then. So they rest for a time so that they can be prepared because cooler heads prevail. And then they're ready to go. They know that they need to find the secret entrance to the because like the door, the whole wall is sealed off, and there's got to be a secret entrance. They got to find that, and they're heading to the stables. And Adso references the conversation he had with Salvatore one of the previous days in the stable with the horse that you rub the miracle whip on it and it goes fast, and that causes William to have an epiphany, and we have that saying that was in the Invisible National Treasure Inc. From Venantius, where it was just like the first and seventh of the fourth, and he's like, no, it's not of the fourth, it's on the four, and he realizes that you have to push the first and seventh letter of the word for four in order to access it. So he figured out how to get inside. So they're heading back to the kitchen, and they hear some sort of muffled screaming or something, and they're like, oh, that must be where the secret passage is, but we have to get to it from above. So they head into the library, they make it to the southern tower where the Leonis is and whatnot, and they see the word for four, and William comes up and he pushes the button that is the Q and the R in the word, is like quattuor, I think is the word for four in, I'm assuming, Latin.
Yeah, these are all Latin.
Yeah, and they open the door, and they have made it inside of the Finis Africae, and that is, I guess, technically, according to the book, the end of day 6. And now we move on to day 7, the final numbered day, which is really just the night of day 6 into the morning of day 7. And our final confrontation with our, for lack of a better term, murderer, who is... Daniel, do you want to do a drum roll for me? If you drum rolled, I didn't hear it, so I'm just gonna pretend that you did.
I think it looks like it picked it up.
Okay, well, hopefully I'll hear it when I'm editing. Jorge. What? It was Jorge all along, the blind man. I'm gonna level with you. Did not surprise me. I definitely thought Jorge had a hand in this. I don't know if I would have gone as far as to say that he was like the mastermind, but I knew that he had something to do with all of this. I just didn't know what. I don't know. Did this catch you off guard?
To the extent that he was involved, yes. But I do think that there was something about how he was with the Adelmo, the death of Adelmo, that did not... That always stuck with me. I felt like, because he was involved in that argument beforehand, and then there was also the whole, like, his penance was like, instead of something, his penance was like kill yourself, essentially. So I don't know. There was just something about, like, I was like, I didn't know if he was going to, because basically this whole last part of the book really threw me. I thought that the meeting was going to be a lot bigger deal. I thought there was going to be like a big showdown between Bernard and William, and that was going to end. That was how it was going to end. Maybe that the murderers were like partially influenced by the Avignon papacy to like make them make people look bad. I didn't really, because so basically these last couple days really threw me. So like after Bernard left, and I was like, well, I guess that makes sense, but I was very I was still pretty surprised, like, about how it all shook out.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't know how Jorge would be involved. I just had a feeling he would be involved in some facet. I just didn't know the what. So him being the mastermind, it was one of those things where I'm just like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, this is our final confrontation, and most of it is just the two of them just kind of talking about everything that happened, just getting our final answers. We're getting William being like, so this is what I thought, and Jorge's like, yeah, well, you were right, and they're just kind of like playing with each other, just kind of like basically
also,
playing a game of
they're having this conversation, the abbot is slowly dying in the sealed section of the... Yeah. I don't know. Like, remember when they were getting in? I think there was like the abbot messed it up, and Jorge basically trapped him in a compartment that was sealed. So he's slowly dying and banging on the walls while this is all happening.
Yeah, basically, like, one of the first things that Jorge tells him is that he's like, yeah, the abbot came to me, and I'm like, all right, cool, meet me in the Finis Africae, but go through the secret path. And the abbot, who did not know anything at all, but wanted to sit there and be the cool guy and solve the mystery himself because he's stupid and arrogant, goes through the secret passage, and as soon as Jorge hears him coming in it, he like cuts the rope that opens the doors, and it just like locks him in. And he's just telling William, he's like, yeah, he's dead. He's not dead yet, but he's dying, and the only way to save him is to basically fix the door, which I'm pretty confident you won't do in time. So, yeah, the abbot's as good as dead.
That was a pretty crazy moment, actually.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, okay. So much for that, I guess. Yeah,
but it kind of. Go ahead.
Oh no, go for it.
I was just gonna say it's interesting that it's that the abbot. I mean, Jorge killed him, but the abbot really killed himself by being like, your investigation is over. Get out of here immediately. Basically, with the idea that he was gonna go fix it, and he immediately gets owned by the oldest blind guy in existence. He was friends with Moses. You know?
Yeah. It just kind of shows just how stupid the abbot is and how like arrogant he was. So I thought it was funny. I'm like, wow, what really honestly just desserts for Albo. Like dude's an idiot and he deserved this. Yeah, so then we have William and Jorge. Like I said, they're just kind of talking to each other, just kind of talking through the plan. I think this is mostly for ADSO and for the reader's sake, just as this is how it happened. And one thing I find really funny about this is Jorge's explaining to William how he did all of this, how he stole the poison from Severinus, how he took a brush from him and he like coated all the pages in the poison and whatnot. And then after telling him all of that, he's like, so what do you want? You know, congratulations, you figured it out. What do you want, William? And William's like, I want the book. I want to read. It turns out it's one of Aristotle's hidden books, Poetics. Which deals with comedy, believe it or not. He's like, I want the book. And Jorge's like, sure, here you go. Make sure you flip through the pages. Read the book.
Take your time with it.
Yeah, you've earned it. And I'm sitting here thinking, you just explained to William that you poisoned the pages. And you're just like, here, read the book. I'm sure nothing bad will happen to you. And it's like, you really expect William to fall for this? Like, seriously? And William, who has figured this out beforehand, but also basically was just told, hey, I poisoned this book for anyone who touches it, by the way. So he puts on some of Severinus' gloves. And he's like flipping through the book. Meanwhile, Jorge, who, might I remind everybody, is blind, by the way, is just probably sitting there in his chair smirking to himself, just like, haha, I've done it. I have tricked William of Baskerville. He will soon die of the poison as well. I am a genius. And then, like, he hears William, like, struggling to turn the page, and he's like, just turn the page, dude, it's fine. And William's like, oh, yeah, I'm wearing gloves, so it's hard to turn the page. And Jorge's just like, oh, darn, I've been fooled. I can't believe it. He outsmarted me. And it's like, yeah, dude, like, what do you think was going to happen? Like, really?
I also just want to throw out here that the book that he's reading, the second part of Aristotle's Poetics, does not exist in the world. Or, like, it's a lost book.
Yeah.
So he is reading something that adds, like, another sort of kind of cool and actually kind of metatextual level, because it's also about, you know, it's also sort of a treatise on literary analysis and stuff. So it's interesting from that standpoint as well.
Yeah. And so we learn, like, the true fate of all of the characters in terms of, like, how they died. William was right all along in that Adelmo killed himself after confessing to Jorge. So that's not really news. How Venantius died. So, like, because he poisoned the pages, Jorge, when, like, the reason why their fingers and their tongue are black is because what these people do, and, like, I have never understood people that do this. I find this disgusting personally. Was, you know, they lick their fingers so that they'll stick to the page and they can turn the page. And because they had the poison on their fingers, when they licked their finger to help them turn the page, that is how they ingested the poison and why their tongue turned black and why their fingers were black. And that's how he figured out, that's why he brought the gloves. all that. So that's how Venantius died. That's how Berengar died. That's how Malachi died. It was just basically all of these dudes uh, just got they just couldn't resist the temptation. The only exception besides Adelmo was Severnius. Oh my god, I did it again. Severinus, and how he died. And the reason why he died was, believe it or not, when Benno told us that Malachi was in there when everyone got there, it's because he was in there when he killed Severinus, because he had been coming to him every day for some herbs sent by Abo, and Jorge had sent him there to kill Severinus. And Severinus let him in because he comes there every day, so he trusted him, and he killed him so he could take the book. So that's how that happened. So now we know how everybody died, and how Jorge's basically just like, yeah, you believe that whole thing about the apocalypse and the seven trumpets and all that, so, like, I just kind of leaned into it, because, like, why not, right? And William's like, yeah, but it also kind of led me to you in the end. So, I mean, thanks, I guess?
It's funny because I think Jorge also is like, well, but you were wrong. That wasn't the actual way you were supposed to solve it. So you were still wrong.
It's like, congratulations, you failed successfully.
And it's like the Chad William with the versus the Virgin Jorge. It's just like, yes. It's like, okay.
Yeah. And, like, okay, so this is kind of the second thing. I love the back and forth between Jorge and William. I thought this was like my favorite moment with Jorge. At least the first half of this.
One thing that I just realized we didn't touch on is Alinardo, I don't know, however you pronounce it, is kind of vindicated in this portion because he was supposed to be the librarian, and he's been warning about all of these things that have happened, but people just think he's crazy.
Yeah, and by the way, should also mention that Jorge was the librarian, that mysterious librarian, the one that undercut Alinardo for it.
Yes, and he was the librarian before he lost his sight.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, this first bit of it is really great, and I love the interactions with Jorge and William. But then, like, what kind of starts to lose me is when William's just like, so, like, dude, there's, like, necromancy books in here, and, like, books written by what you call infidels, Arabs and whatnot, and those are arguably more dangerous to Catholicism than Aristotle. Why are you doing this? And so then he once again falls into his tried and true methodology of why he's such a stupid character, and he's just like, because laughter is sinful, and anybody who laughs is bad, and we shouldn't laugh. And anybody who wants to try to say otherwise is working for the devil. And laughter is not good, so we shouldn't laugh. And Aristotle and philosophy encourages people to embrace laughter and comedy, and that's bad. And God put me here so I could stop people from laughing. And so I have murdered people and orchestrated the murder of people just so I can stop people from laughing. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Like, because, really?
Well, his thinking was it's not merely the laughter. It's that
it's what it means.
It's that by their laughter they are not properly afraid of God, and are not properly reverential of the. But I mean that doesn't make it any better per se. But he's basically saying if people. It's kind of interesting because it almost feels like Echo is saying that I mean, how to say this? I don't want to confuse, because I think people sometimes will confuse what an artist is saying or thinks with the way he writes his characters. But it does kind of feel that at least in the personage of Jorge, that there is this sort of belief that satire and sort of like humor and comedy is sort of crucial to sort of taking down totalitarian systems, what be they in this case the Catholic Church or of like, I don't know, authoritarian structures writ large, because it is something that is very human in a very elemental and a way that is like very pure and without artifice, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like, he's talking about how basically it's the villain who laughs because when they laugh they deny their fear. Like you said, they forget their fear of God and whatnot. But like it just feels so dumb to me. Like this whole point where this dude, he's like, yeah, we need to be afraid of God, and we're not allowed to laugh because that means that we no longer hold God to the reverence that he deserves. And it rings super hollow to me. This is not a criticism of the writing. This is just a criticism of Jorge's motivations. Because it's like, I just feel like you're an idiot, and William kind of expresses this quite well, where he says, "You're the devil." Like, you think you're doing this out of some form of holiness, but you are the problem. You are this whole thing you're preaching against is what you're doing. You have been essentially corrupted by demonic tendencies, satanic tendencies, and you are now the problem. And he's basically just like, no, you. And it's like, wow, great comeback, Jorge. Really really got him there. And so his final act of defiance to William, and to this whole realm of positivity and comedy, is he begins to start tearing the pages out of the book and eating them, knowing that he is consuming the poison that he has done. And he's like, well, basically, what's one more death? I've already won. And before William can stop him, he blows out their lantern, or he snuffs it out with his hand. And he's like, haha, now you can't see, and I can't see either, but I live in the darkness, hoo-hoo. So they're not able
He went Bane on them.
basically. And they're not able to stop him, and he tries to close them into the room, where they'd be trapped and unable to get out, but they're, a young dude and a middle-aged guy, believe it or not, are stronger than an old blind man, so they're able to, like, stop him from closing the door on them, and they get their lantern lit back up, and they're chasing him. And William is basically just like, haha, we got you. And he's just like, oh no, you got me. And it causes him to like fumble and fall down, and they finally are able to catch up to him. A fight ensues because William's trying to save the book. Adzo's trying to help him. And Jorge's trying to eat the book still. It's just it's really
it is
goofy.
Pretty. What's humorous here, and I think this is done intentionally, is he's like going on talking about how laughter is the worst thing, but he's killing himself in the most ridiculous way imaginable. It's just this old guy like scampering through a labyrinth eating a book.
He is laughing, by the way. He's laughing during all of this. He's like, ha 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 ha, as he's like shoving paper in his mouth. And it's like, all right, dude, whatever, I guess. And so, like, in the midst of the scuffle, Adso, who's holding the lantern, gets a little too close to Jorge, and he knocks the lantern out of Adso's hands, and it lands into a cascading pile of books, and it erupts into flames. And Jorge takes the opportunity to chuck the book into the flames, thus destroying possibly the only copy of Poetics, which enrages William, who proceeds
Poetics Part 2.
Yeah, who proceeds to push him down, and they try to smother the flames to no avail, as they're starting to spread. And so William sends Adso to go try and alert the monks to the fire so they can try and bring water and try to save the library. Needless to say, a room full of old books and paper does not do well with fire. And by the time Adso is able to get everybody aware of it, it is ostensibly too late, and we are presented with a bunch of pages talking about how first the library went, and as the room exploded due to the pressure of the fire and the windows blew out, the sparks started to spread, and eventually, throughout the course of the night, the entire abbey gets lit on fire. and it burns for like 3 days, and like the rest of night of day 7, which like I said is really mostly just like the night of day 6 and the morning of day 7, is talking about how the abbey is slowly consumed by the fire, and the monks are powerless to stop it, and there's some that even die in the attempt to do so. And our final conversation in day 7 before we go to the final chapter, which is called Last Page, which is actually like 6 pages
This
long.
is, by the way, again, this is when Benno dies in the fire.
Oh yeah, Benno's just like
He really he really lived the phrase "go die in a fire."
Yeah, right. I can't remember what he says, but he says something that's basically more something along the lines of, "How dare you guys let this happen to the library? Don't worry, I'll save it." And he just runs up into the fire. And this is long after they've determined that it's just there's no way of saving it. So Benno just basically just kills himself, really. So later, dude.
He definitely. I think William was correct when he described him as one of the lusts. He said, Benno, and this is part of when like Adso is. This goes back a little ways, but Adso was like trying to figure out why Remigio was admitting to all these things. He's William, in a very philosophical way, describes there are different kinds of lust. It's not just the physical lust, but there's also the lust for knowledge, the lust for power, the lust for death, that kind of thing. And that's what he's talking. He mentions Benno as one of the examples.
Yeah. And so our last little bit here of day 7 is William and Adso talking as they are watching the abbey slowly be consumed, and William is just really down on himself. He's like, basically, this is my fault. I wasn't smart enough. I didn't all of these deaths because I couldn't figure it out fast enough. And Adzo's trying to be his hype man and be like, no, dude, you figured this out. You say, this is all. You did a great job. And he's just like, it's nice of you to say, but like, just look around you. And then Adso has a major crisis of faith here, to where he's basically just like, if this is how the world is, then how can we be certain there's a God? And William basically just says like, don't think about it. We don't.
Well, he says without saying that he no longer believes in God.
That's kind of. I wasn't really sure if that was the takeaway. Like I was reading that, and I'm like, did William just renounce his faith? Like I wasn't really sure. But he does it. I guess if that was what he does it in a way to where he tries to protect Adso from doing the same.
That is true. That is what happens. But but that's because Adso lives in a worldview that just he fundamentally cannot
sustain.
He cannot. Well, that it's just like he cannot metabolize. He cannot understand like the idea of William not believing in God. When he's saying like, if there is, why, how can God let these things happen? He is genuinely asking. He is not like, it's not causing him. It is causing him despair, but he is not like. I don't think he's truly like having a crisis of faith, so to say. But it's just kind of like.
He's like, basically, how could there be a God if all of this if all of this chaos is random, but it's also part of God's plan? Then how could there be a God?
Mm-hmm. And William, says pretty much without saying, well, there isn't, but he kind of like he stops short of saying that, and then something happens that interrupts them, and they have to go about doing other things, and they never speak. They never speak of the event again, or of that conversation.
Yeah, and so now we're on to Last Page, which is basically the
epilogue.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those. It's think of like in the old '80s movies where there's like the freeze frame and it shows each of the characters and it's like what happened to them after the end of the movie. Like, this is basically our equivalent of that. Him and William part ways eventually. They have their like sorrowful goodbye, and we learn that they never see each other again. And William succumbed to the Black Plague in like the mid 14th century. We get like the whole thing about how the Emperor the somewhat resolution of the Emperor versus the Pope thing, where basically the Emperor overextended himself, and that caused the Pope to be able to swoop in and basically take control, and the Emperor eventually lost that battle, that whole war, and Pope John wins, I guess. So I guess
Yeah.
woo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
William also gives Atso the glasses. That's another thing that happens here.
yeah, he gives him the one that Nicholas made for him. And he's like, so for when, because he got his old pair back, and he's like, for when you will need these in the future. And he's just like, which I'm wearing at this very moment.
Which was kind of touching.
It was. It shows kind of the bond between them. It extends past even his own death, and it's a nice moment for sure. Then like after all of this, Adso returns to Melk. And then later on in life, when he returns to Italy, he goes back to the abbey and to the ruins. And the only thing that really kind of still stands is the edificium. He goes into the library, and there's like miraculously one bookshelf that's still standing, but all of the books that are still on it have succumbed to weathering. So he's like grabbing all of everything that he can find that just has some semblance of information on it, and he's just stuffing it in his packs. And how he spends like a good amount of the rest of his life is anytime he finds a book that he can confirm is a book tied to one of the fragments that he has, he like reads it, and it's like his way of kind of like honoring the memory of it. And he tries to find like patterns in it to see if it's some sort of divine providence that of the scraps that survive, but he can't find anything of it. But he still kind of just holds on to them, and he still kind of cherishes them. And then here at the end of the book, it seems to me, and correct me if you think otherwise, that he starts doing a bunch of metaphors about how he's about to die, how he's at the end of his life. He just kind of like it's just metaphor after metaphor after metaphor of I'm old and about to die. And then the last thing he says, it's this Latin phrase. It's like stat rosa pristina nomina nuda tenimus, which roughly translates to the rose of old remains only in its name, we possess naked names. And that's ostensibly the end of the book.
That's what I gotta say. That's one of the best title drops of all time.
Yeah. I'm sitting there like, why is this called The Name of the Rose? And I read that line and I'm like, oh, there it is. And that's why I must become Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. So yeah, that's the end of the book.
I think that was very meaningful. I thought it was like it kind of really captured the, they are all these names for things. There's these symbols, but do they mean anything? Is there anything that really we only have the name, the meaning may be lost. That kind of thing, and it's. I don't know. The whole book was quite profound, and I think it wrapped up in a very interesting way there.
Yeah, like I said earlier as well. This last part really kind of I don't want to say saved the book for me, because like I said, I was kind of leaning towards like a soft 7 on this one. But like this final third really did kind of push it to an 8 for me, to where I went from being like, yeah, it was. I enjoyed the whole idea of it, but there was a lot that took it down for me. To yeah, there was a lot that took it down for me, but it ended really strong, so it made up for a lot of my personal faults in it. So yeah, this last section was quite good, especially day 5. I really liked how it handled the reveal with Jorge. Even if I found his motivations really stupid, very in character, but just very stupid all the same. Incredibly well written book. Well, I guess I should probably say well translated, because this is a translation.
Well, let's not take credit away from Echo. I think Echo, it's a great book, and he deserves. I mean, the translator definitely deserves credit too, for transmitting these ideas, but Echo did an incredible job here.
Yeah, well, let me clarify what I mean by that, and saying that I can only assume that the original text in Italian is incredibly well written based on the translation, but all I can go off of is the translation. So while I have no, I'm confident that in its language of origin, it is probably a better read than the translation was. So me saying that it was a very well done translation, I think, is more so a credit to Echo itself, because I do think that a lot of things can be lost in a translation, even a good one. So yeah, point being, I guess, is that it's probably better in Italian than it was in English.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I really enjoyed the book. I think my thoughts on it have been pretty clear. I think I've talked about it every time we've gone out on one of these, but I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate you humoring me as we did this one. I know this one was maybe a little bit out of your wheelhouse, but I don't. I've heard about this book for a long time, and I really wanted to read it, and I don't know. I wanted to do another book where that was maybe a little bit beyond what I felt like I had a good grasp for. I thought it was very interesting and a very good way to kind of like stretch myself and kind of really do some serious reading in a way that I might not have done all that often. Although we've done some very interesting and complex books for the purposes of this program. But I think this one is very specifically formulated as a you're supposed to be deconstructing it as you read in a very intentional way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate you picking books that are out of my wheelhouse, because I feel like it would be a little boring and against the point of me wanting to do this in the first place if we only did books that I liked. That I'm like, oh, I know I'm gonna like this because it is a sci-fi or fantasy book or something like that. Doing things that are out of my wheelhouse it's it's how I feel I challenge myself and become, I don't want to say a little more learned, but just a little more kind of like open to new or even like different experiences. It's just another way of doing so. So yeah, like even if we would have finished this book and I was like, I hated it, it didn't do anything for me, 5 out of 10, did not like it at all, I still would have appreciated the fact that we read it anyways, because it was a new and challenging experience for me.
Yeah.
I'm glad it didn't come to that, but
I'm glad that it included like the little mysteries and the moments that it did, because it does help, because it can be a dense read at times, but I think things like the mystery and like the well written, the characters and all of that stuff, it really, so I don't want the people to come away with this, if they haven't read it already, with like this idea that it's a very stodgy, like an almost like a textbook. It actually reads very well, and I think the little elements of plot, I think Echo does like a great job here of like leavening what would otherwise be almost a philosophical treatise, or treatise rather, to make it very engaging. So I don't know, that's something that I've thought about, when it comes to writing, is how if you want to really want to communicate some idea, and you want to do it without coming off as preachy, so to say, which is interesting because of the place where he chose to set this book. How do you do that? And I think this book provides a very good example of how to do that.
yeah. So yeah, overall, I would say this was a very positive experience for me, and I'm glad we read it.
Well, I think that's about it for me, unless you have any other final thoughts.
No, I think you summed it up quite nicely.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and also, thank you everybody for listening. I particularly enjoyed this one, and I certainly hope you all did as well. if you have enjoyed it, if you wouldn't mind dropping a nice review for us or commenting on the YouTube videos, we definitely would appreciate that. It would really help in getting these, getting these out there and getting people's eyes on it. But anyway, thank you for your time, and we will see you next time.
Yep. Take care.